other nations in terms of trade and economics, and we are losing ground rapidly there. But not only that, we're spending billions in taking care of the welfare cases and taking care of the prisons, recidivism, underemployment instead of unemployment. When there's a child in one of these districts who could be the next Einstein, he could be the next great orator, he could be the next physicist, and instead he's stuck flipping burgers if he isn't going into far more lucrative gang work. So take this with you. Education reform, whether it's here in the districts costing too much or whether it's in the inner city, is the next great civil rights issue of the next few years, and we should label it as such, and we should fight it as such. Because this is really about children's civil rights. And there's many, many legal cases we can go through. We're not going to win the first couple of them. But if you really think about it, if you look at an equal protection clause, that every single child and every single citizen has the equal protection of the laws in this nation, then it stands to reason that you can't give $10,000 to the Chicago public schools, being eaten up by their bureaucrats and all the systems that they have, and give $10,000 to a rich suburban school and tell you that this one kid is getting an equal education to that kid based on $10,000 being sucked into the maw of a large urban bureaucracy. The only way to truly have an education system that comports with the Equal Protection Clause is to fund each child equally, at least at the state level. Because as we know, constitutionally, education is a state issue. I'd be more than happy to answer some of the critiques. I love debating this issue. I love challenging my opponents on the union side to debates. When I had a radio show, it was a lot of fun. It's like, call me up, hit me with your best shot. We are at the point where they can't win this debate over the long term. So I want to give you a few closing thoughts here. I was going to go over some of the critiques, but I can answer those. It's never a bad time to promote a good idea. Do not be swayed by the idea that, oh, they're too powerful, or, oh, we can only do that in the city, we can't do it in the suburbs. If you have a good idea, if you think you've got a better way, fight for it, promote it, and don't let anybody tell you that it's not a good time to do that. Don't let somebody say, no, we're worried about this bill right now that's in front of the Senate. We don't want to confuse the issue with this. Find a good idea and promote it. And the bolder, the better. Now, about empowering your legislators, I'd like to leave you with a little thought here to think about, because we talked about politicians hungry for power, and we talked about statesmen. And I would submit to you to show some grace to all the politicians and statesmen out there to understand this. There is, in every single one of us, a ravenous politician wanting more pay, perks, power, pensions, and pork for us. It would be better for me if I got paid more for less work. And there is also in us a statesman who understands what's good for society, that what is better for society might be better for me in the long run, enlightened self-interest, those kinds of things. And our job should not be to go to the politicians and stick our fingers in their chest and beat them around. That might be a good idea sometimes. But to use our skills and our knowledge and our decency to convert the politicians one little bit at a time from that little political part of them to the statesman side of them. And we can do that by effective communication, being able to cogently and intelligently argue our point of view and to tell them about our ideas, and then to give them the support. Because let's be honest here, this is something else to take away. The education reform debate in America is no longer really an academic debate. There are debates about whether we test people this way or whether we measure teachers that way, and those are good academic issues to push around. But for the most part, I can say this: there will be no education reform, small or large, that works, that is effective. And we've been reforming education for 50 years and it hasn't worked. There is no education reform that will be effective that the teachers' unions and the interlocking interests that they are the foundation of will let you pass. It is a political battle, and you have to defeat them. If you aren't comfortable with that, I don't know what to say. If you're not comfortable going to a barbecue and saying, I'm against this referendum and spending too much money, and actually fighting that battle with your friends and neighbors who still think it's for the children, then you should get a spine. And you should give your politician friends a spine, and don't demand of them something you won't do yourselves. You have to be able to sit at that barbecue and say, I think giving more money to the teachers' unions is wrong. I think teachers shouldn't be unionized. I don't think they should have a right to strike. And if you're not comfortable with that, I would suggest you get comfortable with that if you want to change the system, because it is a political battle. And that brings me to my close, and this is where I'm going to draw a little picture for you. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Good acoustics in here. Here's a hurricane wind blowing against a levee. And here's New Orleans, 9/4. And I didn't draw it as well as I'd like to, but this is pressure. And what they talked about, I saw this on a science show a little bit ago, they talked about how a little bit of water started getting up underneath it, and it was pushing, and it was pushing, and it was pushing. Okay? And the levee looked fine, but underneath there was all this degradation and subsidence taking place, and with the pressure keeping up and the water getting higher, about 20 feet of this levee just jumped. Got pushed underneath, the pressure stayed on it, and it just jumped. And all of a sudden, the levee was busted. And I'm bringing that little scientific fact to you with this idea. Our opponents are going to look like they're too powerful. The teachers' unions will look like they cannot be beat. They will look like they will always defeat you, up until the point they collapse and you defeat them. This is not an incremental battle. There are increments to be fought, there are incremental conversations to be had, but this is a battle of continuous pressure against a system that has lost its moral legitimacy. And that is how you should frame it. A system that spends this much money on so much waste, fraud, abuse, and financial shenanigans inside probably your district, okay, and fails to educate as much as it fails to educate for the money it's spending, and stands in the way of every positive reform. They won't give a poor family the right to go to a charter school in a city of Chicago because they might lose money on their next contract because it isn't a unionized position, and they stand there and talk about something being for the children. They have lost their moral legitimacy. And let me tell you how powerful and how undermining of their strength that argument is. Ronald Reagan stood up and questioned the moral legitimacy of the evil empire. Mahatma Gandhi stood up and questioned the moral legitimacy of British rule, which I believe we did a little bit before that. Okay? And Martin Luther King questioned the moral legitimacy of white segregationists who were fire hosing and beating and maiming and hanging black kids and black families who wanted the shot at the title, the same way we whites had down south. When you question the moral legitimacy of people who have lost theirs, the speed at which they become undermined accelerates rapidly. So with all of that in mind, I'm going to leave you with one of my favorite quotes. I put it on the head of my education plan that I wrote a while back. And it basically says this: be bold. And with boldness comes great power. David Burnham wrote this. Make no little plans, they leave no magic to stir men's blood. But probably themselves will not be realized. Make big plans, aim high in hope and work, remembering that a noble logical diagram, once recorded, will not die, but will long after we are gone, be a living thing with ever-growing insistence. Make no small plans, make big plans. There is boldness and magic in them. Thank you very much.